Everyone doing today? It's your boy JG Domination, and today we are here with the notable Day 2 and Day 3 picks in the 2020 NFL Draft. This time, we're going to be talking about the NFC West. This is the final division we will be talking about. We're going to start off, of course, with the Arizona Cardinals, work our way over to the San Francisco 49ers, talk about the Los Angeles Rams, and wrap it up with the Seattle Seahawks. So let's go ahead and get started with the Arizona Cardinals. I have 4 picks that I have written down for the Cardinals. And again, I write down the players that I know a good bit about, so I'm not just sitting up here talking out of my ass, acting like I know everything. So let's just go ahead and get started. The Cardinals, I have 4 players written down. All right. Offensive tackle Josh Jones, a 3rd rounder out of Houston. Nose tackle / defensive tackle Leki Fotu, a 4th rounder out of Utah. Outside linebacker Evan Weaver, a 6th rounder out of California, and running back Eno Benjamin, a 7th rounder out of Arizona State. So for Josh Jones, pretty good, left tackle prospect, kind of not as good as like the big 4, Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, Mekhi Becton, not as good as those guys, but not as far off either. It's kind of surprising he fell into the 3rd round. A lot of people thought he had a chance to sneak into the 1st round or potentially go early 2nd, but even I felt that way as well. And here he is in like the beginning portion of the 3rd round, and he falls right into the Cardinals' laps. They don't even have to trade up to get him. He just fell right there. It almost makes not getting a left tackle early worth it, because Josh Jones was right there for the taking, and they made that selection. Good pick. They're already kind of set this year anyway at the tackle position. They have DJ Humphries at left tackle, who they paid a lot of money to, and Marcus Gilbert, the former Pittsburgh Steeler, coming back for another year. But this is a good long-term option to be your right tackle, potentially, in Josh Jones. Now we get to nose tackle / defensive tackle Leki Fotu, a 4th round out of Utah. You're probably like, why would I have him listed as a nose tackle / defensive tackle? Aren't they technically the same thing? Kind of, but not really. Nose tackle is the guy that plays in the middle on top of the center in 3-4 defenses. Defensive tackles kind of line up, in between the guard and the center. So it's kind of not the same thing. It's basically a 3-tech versus being a 1-tech or 0-tech, whatever. So anyway, to me, if you ran a 3-4, he could be a good nose tackle for you. If you ran a 4-3, he wouldn't be a bad option as a 4-3 defensive tackle. But I kind of project him to be that nose tackle, that run stopper for this team. They currently run a 3-4, and he could play early downs. And I think that'll be the role that he has, or at least competes for early on. But this team definitely has the flexibility to move to a 4-3. And we'll kind of explain that with our next pick. And that is outside linebacker Evan Weaver, a 6th rounder out of California. You're probably thinking, why do I have him listed as an outside linebacker? I thought he was a middle linebacker prospect. I don't view him as a middle linebacker. I don't think he's a middle linebacker. And I know it's a little insulting, but it's just my opinion. To me, I view him as a 4-3 outside linebacker. He can be your strong side linebacker in your nickel packages. And just looking at this team, they have the flexibility to move to a 4-3, and a lot of that is because of the Isaiah Simmons pick. They also brought in Devondre Campbell and Devon Kennard, 2 other linebackers who aren't necessarily edge rushers. There's guys that can play in the middle, play off the ball. So this defense, in terms of their personnel, has the ability to switch to a 4-3, or at least be a hybrid defense. And to me, Evan Weaver fits more of the 4-3 looks than he does a 3-4 defense. But I feel like early on he's going to be a special teamer. I don't really see him getting snaps like that, because you have a lot of linebackers on this team. You have Devon Kennard and Devondre Campbell coming in. You have Jordan Hicks already on this team. You have Hassan Reddick, who at least has 1 year left on his deal. You have Chandler Jones, of course, rushing the passer. So, this team already has their linebackers in place. So, it's going to be hard for Weaver to really carve out a role early on. So, he's probably going to have to play special teams. And then Eno Benjamin, a 7th round running back from Arizona State. Local guy staying in Arizona. I like the pick. Just good value here with the running back position. They already have Kenyon Drake, who they brought back on a 1 year, pretty hefty price to like $8 million for Kenyon Drake. Yikes. But, I mean, it's for 1 year, so who cares? They also have Chase Edmonds, and they traded away David Johnson and a second-round pick to get DeAndre Hopkins, so I'm sure they're really sad about that. So their running back room actually looks pretty good. And, Benjamin, to me, he'll find a role in this team. They like to play a lot of people on offense. So to me, he'll find a role. I don't think he's just going to ride the bench. I don't think he's just going to return kicks. I feel like he will have a role later on in the season. Now we go to the San Francisco 49ers. They only have one pick, not because their draft sucked. They just didn't have a whole lot of draft picks. So they have one late round pick that I wrote down. That's tight end Charlie Warner, a 6th round out of Georgia. More of a blocking tight end, but he did see more production compared to some of the other Georgia tight ends in the past, such as Isaac Nada. He's just going to fit the run blocking tight end role for this team in their running attack, zone run, outside run, inside run. He's just going to be a good blocker, a good second tight end or third tight end to have on the roster. What's interesting is I met a guy who is like really linked to Georgia. I'm not going to give away names, but I met a guy, a little over a year ago before this past college football season, and somebody asked him, at that conference or whatever, like, do you think Georgia will start using their tight ends more in the passing game? And he kind of hinted at the fact, obviously Georgia's a run-first team, but he said, yeah, the production should go up eventually. It's all basically on Fromm. They can draw up plays all they want to, but Fromm has to throw it to the tight end. And we did see more tight end production, and this guy did get a little bit more production than some Georgia tight ends in the past. So I would say reliable information right there from the guy that I met. I don't know how he'll be used in San Francisco. I think he'll just be a blocking tight end, be a great special teamer, but that's about it. But still a notable pick nonetheless. He will have a role on this team. Then we go to the Los Angeles Rams. This is a team right here. A lot of people talk about who had the best draft. I'm not saying the Rams had the best draft, but I think their draft is going under the radar. I have 5 picks that I have written down. I think their draft has gone under the radar. That's just my opinion. But we got running back Cam Akers, a 2nd rounder out of Florida State. Wide receiver Van Jefferson, a 2nd rounder out of Florida. Edge rusher Terrell Lewis, a 3rd rounder out of Alabama. Safety Terrell Burgess, a 3rd rounder out of Utah. And tight end Bryson Hopkins, a 4th rounder out of Purdue. So we'll start off with Cam Akers. That was their first 2nd round selection from Florida State. Honestly, one of the better running backs in the country, but he plays on a shitty team with a bad offensive line, so you really wouldn't know it. But Cam Akers, this is a good pick right here. You can argue a little too early considering, number one, the value. Number two, other needs that the Rams may have, but this team obviously lost Todd Gurley, and this pick kind of tells me that they don't view Darrell Henderson as a running back 1. They view him as a pitch reliever. They view him as a running back 2. So this team was really adamant to find their number 1 running back, and it ended up being Cam Akers. I'm sure they had interest in guys like Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, but those guys went off the board. So they get Cam Akers, a guy who I think will be pretty solid for this team. Early on at least. And then wide receiver Van Jefferson, 2nd rounder out of Florida. This team obviously traded Brandon Cooks. Van Jefferson is not a Brandon Cooks clone. He's kind of similar to what you have in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. He's a guy who's a really good route runner, can play in the slot, but he's probably going to play on the outside because Cooper Kupp is their slot receiver. I like Van Jefferson. He was one of the few receivers I was hoping Green Bay would actually draft because I like his game. I'm surprised he actually, was there not there in the 2nd round, but I'm surprised somebody picked him in the 2nd round because we've seen a lot of other players slip because of injury, and I thought for sure Van Jefferson was going to slip because of injury, but he ended up getting drafted around where I thought he would, mid to late 2nd round. And then we got edge rusher Terrell Lewis, a 3rd rounder out of Alabama. He slipped because of injury. There was talks early on in the process he could sneak into the 1st round. Some mock drafts had him going into the 1st round. I didn't really see it. I thought he'd be an early 2nd at the earliest point, but he ends up going later in the 3rd round, which is A little shocking, but not really. Some players have slipped because of injury. He's a good player, though. Just a straight-up power rusher. And this team, of course, lost Dante Fowler Jr. They cut Clay Matthews. So they have Samson Ebukam, and they need another guy next to him to rush the passer. And to me, Terrell Lewis is going to come in, day one starter. I don't know how effective he'll be statistically, but if he's healthy and he is able to get some sack production, he could potentially be, a sleeper for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think he'll win it, similar to what I said about Grant Delpit. I don't think he'll win it, but if he were to get production and feed off of Aaron Donald, he could put his name in the hat. That's all it really takes. And then safety Terrell Burgess, third rounder out of Utah. I like the safety pick right here. I think safety was kind of an under-the-radar need. Eric Weddle obviously retiring. They have John Johnson there as their other safety. Terrell will obviously compete for the free safety spot. I did think safety was an underrated need, and it's a good pickup right there for the Rams. Playing at Utah, they play that cover 3. Defense over there, a lot of their players did get drafted as well. Another thing that's gone under the radar is Utah, in terms of their players getting drafted, it was a huge success. And then tight end Bryson Hopkins, a 4th rounder out of Purdue. A little bit of a confusing pick, but if this team wants to move on from Gerald Everett, it kind of makes sense in that way, because Tyler Higbee started to play a lot more and was actually more productive with Jared Goff, aside from opposed to Gerald Everett, I should say. So if this team wants to have Bryson Hopkins be their second tight end behind Tyler Higbee, or Hopkins potentially being their first tight end behind, or with Tyler Higbee behind him, this could mean that Gerald Everett could be out the door, because when you see Everett play and Higbee play, obviously, to me, Everett's the better tight end, but Higbee is the one actually getting more production and getting more involved. So maybe Everett's just not a fit for the Rams anymore. Maybe they don't view him as, a long-term option. So an interesting pick from the Rams nonetheless. And finally, the Seahawks. The Seahawks every year, they get clowned for having an interesting draft, to say the least. But hey, can't hate on it just yet, But I have 3 picks I have written down for Seattle. We got edge rusher Darrell Taylor, a 2nd rounder out of Tennessee. Offensive guard Damian Lewis, a 3rd rounder out of LSU. And tight end Colby Parkinson, a 4th rounder out of Stanford. Darrell Taylor, let's talk about it. So this team actually traded up pretty far in the 2nd round to get him at pick 48. I think they traded up from pick 59 or something to come get Darrell Taylor, who actually played 3-4 outside linebacker for Tennessee. Obviously, he's going to convert to defensive end. He has a lot of tools that defensive-minded coaches can work with. You see some of the explosiveness, you see the bend, you see he'll offer some versatility. Has a good motor as well. So there is some coachable traits there. A little too early for me. But obviously Pete Carroll saw something in this guy, so he went up and got him. So, we'll see how it turns out. Obviously, this team drafted L.J. Collier last year. He's been underwhelming, but again, rookie year. I don't know. Maybe these guys gel together. And then we got Damian Lewis right here in the 3rd round, a guard out of LSU. I actually do like Damian Lewis. We've seen a lot of offensive linemen from LSU get overdrafted, or at least be a little overvalued because of how good LSU was. You look at Lloyd Cushenberry, Sadiq Charles, they're good examples of that. But I actually do like Damian Lewis, and I think this is a good fit for Damian Lewis, a team that's just going to run the ball, play action with Russ. I actually do like this pick. You get younger at the guard position. This team actually did cut DJ Fluker and Justin Britt because they have a ton of offensive linemen on their roster. And here's one of them, Damian Lewis. And then Colby Parkinson, a 4th round tight end from Stanford. This team, it's interesting. They got a lot of tight ends over there. I think they still have Jacob Hollister, who played a lot last year. They still have Will Dissly. They brought in Greg Olsen. I'm pretty sure they still have Luke Wilson, unless I'm just tripping. They were interested in Jordan Reed. I don't think they got Jordan Reed. And now they get Colby Parkinson. And in the 7th round, the reason in the 7th round, I guess I'll talk about it too. They got Stephen Sullivan, who went to LSU as well. 7th round tight end, actually was the backup to Thaddeus Moss, which is interesting. They took the backup over Thaddeus Moss because they were both on the board. But this team has a lot of tight ends. They're kind of like in Bears territory right now for how many tight ends they have on the team. But again, not gonna knock Seattle's draft. You know, was it an interesting draft? Yeah. But again, this is the same team in the year 2012 who drafted Bruce Irvin, Bobby Wagner, and Russell Wilson, and was given a C- by Mel Kiper Jr. and an F by Bleacher Report. And that draft actually aged beautifully because it just so happens that Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson are the two best players on the team, and Bruce Irvin had a pretty solid career. So, you know, who's the ones laughing now? Seattle, because it got him a championship and 2 Super Bowl appearances overall. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and the next video that comes out, again, will be stock up, stock down for the AFC and the NFC, and then I'll recap all the draft talk and talk about my favorite pick for every team. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Peace out.